You ever have that moment where your heart tells you the truth before your mind catches up? Yeah, that was me the second her boss walked in, not because of how he looked, but because of how she changed. Her hand slipped out of mine like it suddenly disgusted her, and she took 2 steps away, pretending we weren't even together. Then, right there in front of everyone, she said one sentence, calm, confident, and sharp enough to slice through me like I didn't matter at all. A sentence that didn't just humiliate me, it erased me. And what happened after that changed everything. Hey beautiful souls, thank you so much for clicking on today's story. I hope you're having an amazing day wherever you're watching from. Let me know in the comments which city or country you're tuning in from. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, what are you waiting for? My mom said I can't reach 1K subs by the end of the month. Please help me prove her wrong. Each subscription means the world to me. Now, back to this emotional journey. The way she spoke that day? It rewrote everything I thought I knew about her. The woman I'd built dreams with, planned futures with, trusted with every vulnerable part of me, suddenly became someone I didn't recognize. But the real question is, why would the woman I love choose her boss over me? Ethan Hunt was the kind of man who built his life on bedrock principles. Loyalty. Honesty. Hard work. The son of a construction foreman, he'd grown up watching his father come home with calloused hands and a straight spine, no matter how exhausting the day had been. A man's word is all he really owns, his father used to say. At 32, Ethan had built a respectable career as an architectural designer at a mid-sized firm. Not spectacular enough to make headlines, but solid enough to build a future on. His colleagues described him as the guy who stays late to help everyone else finish. His friends called him the one who never forgets a birthday. He was the emergency contact for 4 different people who weren't even related to him. But beneath that dependable exterior lived a fear that followed him like a shadow, the quiet dread of not being enough. Not successful enough. Not ambitious enough. Not worthy enough of someone truly choosing him above all else. I've always been the safe choice, he confided to the camera. The backup plan. The guy women settle for after chasing the exciting ones. Elle Deckard had been different. At least, he thought she was. They'd met 3 years ago at a charity gala where his firm had donated design services. Elle, with her analytical mind and quick wit, had approached him with questions about sustainable architecture that left him impressed and slightly intimidated. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and determined green eyes. She didn't laugh at my jokes right away, Ethan recalled with a wistful smile. She made me earn it. And when she finally did laugh, man, I was done for. Elle worked as a senior marketing strategist at Pinnacle Innovations, a fast-growing tech company that had recently been making waves in the industry. Ambitious didn't begin to cover it, Elle approached her career with laser focus, often working through weekends and taking calls during dinner. I admired her drive, Ethan said, how she knew exactly what she wanted and went after it. We balanced each other out. I thought we did, anyway. The first 2 years had been close to perfect. They moved in together after 14 months. Started talking about someday plans, the house outside the city, maybe children in a few years. Elle kept her apartment as an office space, but she slept in his arms every night. Until 6 months ago, when Jordan Bates entered the picture. Would you mind subscribing real quick if you haven't already? Ethan's voice softened. Sharing these stories takes courage, and seeing that subscriber count grow, it really keeps me going. Do you know you can save a soul right now just by hitting subscribe? Thank you. Jordan Bates became the new CEO of Pinnacle Innovations with the subtlety of a hurricane. 42, divorced twice, with a reputation for transforming struggling companies into gold mines. He drove a matte black Tesla, wore suits that cost more than Ethan's monthly salary, and had a habit of maintaining eye contact just long enough to make people uncomfortable. The first time I met him was at the company holiday party, Ethan recalled. He shook my hand and said, "So you're the architect?" I corrected him, told him I was an architectural designer. He just smirked and said, "Same difference." Then he turned to Elle and said, "You've got potential beyond this place. We should talk." That night, Elle had talked about Jordan Bates for hours. His vision for the company. His connections in Silicon Valley. The changes he planned to implement. I thought she was just excited about work, Ethan said. I was happy for her. But small things began to change. Elle started working later. Her texts became shorter, less frequent. She bought new clothes, more expensive, more polished. She changed her hair, straightening the waves she used to let fall naturally. When Ethan complimented her, she'd smile distractedly and say, "Jordan thinks professional presentation is key to being taken seriously." Jordan. Not Mr. Bates or my boss. Just Jordan. I noticed, but I didn't want to be that guy, Ethan admitted. The insecure boyfriend who can't handle his girlfriend's success. So I swallowed it. Supported her. Listened to her talk about Jordan's latest brilliant strategy or Jordan's connections or Jordan's insights. Their date nights dwindled from weekly to monthly. Twice, Elle cancelled at the last minute because of emergency meetings that couldn't wait. Ethan would find himself alone in restaurants, making awkward small talk with waiters who gave him pitying looks. One night, he woke at 3 a.m. to find Elle's side of the bed empty. He found her in the living room, bathed in the blue light of her laptop, furiously typing. "Can't it wait until morning?" he'd asked. Elle hadn't even looked up. "Jordan needs this presentation by 8. He's meeting with investors." "Since when do you do his presentations for him?" She'd finally glanced up, irritation flashing across her face. "Since he recognized I'm good at it." Not everyone has the luxury of coasting in their career, Ethan. The words had stung more than she knew. Looking back, Ethan said softly to the camera, there were 100 warning signs. The way she'd jump when her phone buzzed with his name. How she'd mention his opinions in everyday conversations. Jordan says this restaurant is overrated. Jordan thinks that book is essential reading. Jordan believes in intermittent fasting. Elle's friend Samantha had pulled Ethan aside at a dinner party. "Be careful," she'd whispered after too many glasses of wine. "I've seen how Jordan operates. He likes to collect people. Especially the talented ones. Especially women." "What does that mean?" Ethan had asked. Samantha had just squeezed his arm. "Just keep your eyes open." But Ethan had convinced himself it was just professional admiration. A mental relationship. He trusted Elle. He believed in them. "The thing about trust," Ethan said, looking directly at the camera, "is that it makes you blind. Especially when you're afraid of what you might see if you really looked." He didn't realize then that everything was about to collapse in the most public, humiliating way possible. By the way, if you're feeling this story already and haven't subscribed yet, don't break my heart like that. Tap the button. I share these stories because they matter, and your support means everything. Pinnacle's annual Innovation Gala. Ethan paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. That was the name printed in gold lettering on the invitation Elle had placed on our kitchen counter 6 weeks earlier. She'd been talking about it for months, how Jordan was transforming it from the boring corporate dinner it had been in previous years to a showcase event with major investors, tech journalists, and industry influencers. The night of the gala arrived on a crisp autumn evening. Ethan had bought a new suit for the occasion, charcoal grey with a subtle texture that the salesman assured him was elegant without trying too hard. He'd even splurged on cufflinks, small silver ones with architectural angles that Elle had once pointed out in a store window. "You look handsome," Elle had said when he emerged from the bedroom, but her eyes were already back on her phone, fingers flying over the screen. "Jordan just texted. He wants me to meet the Forbes writer before the speeches start." Ethan drove them to the venue, a renovated industrial space with exposed brick, steel beams, and dramatic lighting that transformed the raw space into something both edgy and elegant. As they walked in, Elle's hand was warm in his, her shoulder occasionally brushing against his arm as they navigated through clusters of people. "I remember thinking how beautiful she looked," Ethan said. She was wearing this midnight blue dress that seemed to catch the light whenever she moved. Her hair was up, showing off her neck in a way that always made my heart skip. And there was this electricity coming off her. Like she was exactly where she belonged. Elle introduced him to colleagues, clients, partners. Each time, she'd say his name with a little squeeze of his hand, a small gesture that felt like their own private language. "I'm proud you're here with me." For an hour, everything felt perfect. Better than perfect, it felt like a glimpse into their future. Elle ascending in her career, Ethan supporting her, both of them navigating these spaces together as a team. And then Jordan Bates arrived. The entire room shifted, Ethan recalled. It wasn't obvious, people didn't stop talking or turn to stare, but there was this awareness that rippled through the crowd. Like everyone simultaneously straightened their posture just a little bit. Jordan moved through the room with practiced ease, stopping to shake hands, clap shoulders, kiss cheeks. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit with a subtle pattern that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. His salt and pepper hair was styled in a deliberate way that suggested he paid someone very well to make it look effortlessly tousled. Elle's hand tensed in Ethan's. He felt her pulse quicken. "I need to check if he's ready for the presentation," she murmured, already pulling away. Ethan nodded, watching as she weaved through the crowd toward her boss. Jordan's face lit up when he saw her approach, a smile that was all bright teeth and focused attention. He leaned down to say something in her ear, his hand briefly touching the small of her back. Something cold settled in Ethan's stomach. 20 minutes passed. Elle hadn't returned. Ethan found himself in an awkward conversation with an app developer who kept looking over Ethan's shoulder, clearly hoping for a more advantageous networking opportunity. Finally, Ethan excused himself and went looking for Elle. He found her near the stage area, standing with Jordan and 3 people he didn't recognize, an older man in an expensive suit, a woman with a press badge, and a younger man furiously taking notes on a tablet. "This is the campaign I was telling you about," Elle was saying, her voice animated in that way it got when she was in her element. "The metrics have already shown a 40% increase in engagement, and we're only in phase 1. Ethan approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt. He stood just at the edge of their circle, waiting for a natural pause in the conversation. When Elle glanced up and saw him, something flashed across her face, not pleasure, not welcome, but something more complicated. Something that looked almost like annoyance. Jordan followed her gaze. "And who's this?" he asked, though the slight narrowing of his eyes suggested he knew exactly who Ethan was. Before Ethan could speak, Elle stepped slightly away from him. The movement was subtle but unmistakable, a physical distancing. "This is Ethan," she said, her voice cool and professional. "No mention of my boyfriend or my partner. Just his name, hanging in the air without context." "Ah, the architect," Jordan said with the same dismissive smirk Ethan remembered from their first meeting. "Architectural designer," Ethan corrected automatically, extending his hand. "It's good to see you again." Jordan shook his hand with the briefest of grips. Elle was just walking us through her brilliant strategy for the Westridge account. "She's quite the find." The older man nodded. "You've assembled quite a team, Jordan." "Only the best," Jordan agreed, his hand returning to Elle's back, this time resting just below her shoulder blade. The touch was proprietary, confident. Elle especially has proven herself indispensable. Something in his tone made Ethan's jaw tighten. "We've been together nearly 3 years, Ethan said, directing his words to the group but looking at Elle. It wasn't like him to assert himself this way, but some instinct pushed him to stake his claim, to remind Elle of their connection in this room where she suddenly seemed like a stranger. A moment of awkward silence followed. The woman with the press badge raised an eyebrow. The note-taker's fingers paused over his tablet. And then Elle spoke the sentence, the one that would play on repeat in Ethan's mind for weeks afterward. She laughed lightly, her eyes not meeting Ethan's, and said clearly enough for everyone to hear, "Ethan's just a friend who likes to exaggerate our relationship, he does this at every work event." The words hung in the air like a slap. Just a friend. Exaggerate our relationship. Does this at every work event. 3 years. A shared apartment. Whispered dreams of marriage. All erased in a single sentence, delivered with a dismissive laugh. "I felt like I'd been shoved into ice water," Ethan said quietly to the camera. "I couldn't breathe. Couldn't speak. The room seemed to tilt around me." Jordan smirked, a flash of victory in his eyes. The others looked embarrassed for Ethan, their gazes sliding away from his stunned face. In that moment, Ethan had 3 choices: make a scene, call her out, or swallow the humiliation. He chose silence. With a stiff nod that encompassed the entire group, he turned and walked away. His legs carried him automatically through the crowd, past the bar where he considered ordering something strong, and finally outside to the valet stand. I sat in my car for 45 minutes, Ethan recalled. Just sitting there, engine off, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed once, a text from Elle asking where I'd gone. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a where are you? Jordan's speech is about to start. He didn't answer. Eventually, he drove home alone. Elle returned at 2 a.m., smelling of champagne and expensive perfume. She slipped into bed without a word, keeping to her side as if an invisible wall had been erected down the center of the mattress. In the morning, when Ethan finally asked her about what she'd said, Elle had shrugged. I was just keeping things professional, she said, not looking up from her coffee. You know how important this account is. Jordan was introducing me to Walter Kingsley. He practically owns half the tech startups in the country. You called me just a friend, Ethan said quietly. You said I exaggerate our relationship. Elle sighed, finally meeting his eyes. Don't be so sensitive. It was just networking talk. But it wasn't just networking talk. It was the first crack, a fissure that would quickly spread and deepen until everything between them shattered completely. Before we continue with what happened next, Ethan said, looking directly into the camera, if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you as part of the family. Go on, I'll wait. Hitting that subscribe button is basically feeding a random kid soul right now. And if you've experienced something like this before, drop it in the comments. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these experiences, it helps. The days following the gala unfolded like a slow-motion collapse. Elle was physically present but emotionally absent, moving through their apartment like a ghost with a schedule. She left earlier each morning and returned later each night, often smelling of expensive restaurants where the team had dinner meetings. Her phone never left her hand, and she'd take calls on the balcony, voice low and professional, even at midnight. On Thursday evening, for days after the gala, I tried to talk to her again, Ethan said. I made her favorite pasta dish and bought that Pinot Noir she loves. I thought, maybe we just need to reconnect. Elle had arrived home at 9:30, already typing on her phone as she kicked off her heels by the door. What's all this? She asked, barely glancing at the candlelit table. Dinner, Ethan replied, trying to keep his voice light. Thought we could use a night in together. Elle's fingers paused over her screen. For a moment, something like guilt flickered across her face. That's sweet, but I already ate. Jordan ordered in for everyone staying late on the Westridge pitch. She dropped her purse on the counter, narrowly missing the wine glasses Ethan had set out. I should actually get some notes together for tomorrow's meeting. Elle, Ethan said, the single syllable of her name heavy with everything he couldn't articulate. Can we talk about what happened at the gala? She sighed, impatience thinning her lips. I already told you, it wasn't personal. It was business. How is pretending I'm not your boyfriend business? You don't understand the industry, she said, the words clipped. Jordan is building a certain culture at Pinnacle. We need to project the right image. And I'm not part of the right image. Elle's silence was answer enough. Why don't we grab breakfast together tomorrow, she finally offered, already moving toward the bedroom. We can talk properly then. But breakfast never happened. Elle was gone before dawn, a text message explaining that Jordan had called an emergency strategy session. Settle in, Ethan said to the camera, his eyes tired. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. You're safe here, we're all just trying to make sense of the hard parts of life together. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern repeated with painful predictability. Ethan would try to create opportunities for connection, dinners, movie nights, weekend plans, and Elle would evaporate like morning mist, always with Jordan's name attached to her excuses. Jordan needs me to revise the presentation. Jordan scheduled a client dinner. Jordan wants my input on the new campaign direction. Ethan began noticing inconsistencies. Small at first, then increasingly difficult to ignore. Elle said she was working late at the office, but her location on their shared app showed her at an upscale restaurant across town. When he mentioned it casually the next morning, she quickly deleted the app from her phone, claiming it drained her battery. She'd say she was in meetings all evening, but Instagram stories from co-workers showed company happy hours where Elle sat beside Jordan, both laughing over cocktails. Text messages appeared on her phone from Jordan at all hours, some professional, others ambiguously personal. That blue dress today. Perfect choice. Dinner was excellent. Your insights always sharpen my thinking. Sometimes I think you're the only one who truly understands the vision. Ethan saw these messages not because he snooped, but because Elle had stopped hiding her phone, as if his feelings were so inconsequential they weren't worth the effort of secrecy. I kept telling myself there was an explanation, Ethan said. That I was overreacting. That Elle would never actually cross that line. He tried everything to save what they had. He suggested couples therapy. Elle was too busy. He proposed a weekend getaway. Elle couldn't step away from work right now. He even applied for a promotion at his firm, thinking perhaps his own career advancement might rebalance whatever was shifting between them. I was grasping at anything, Ethan admitted. Trying to be more understanding, more supportive, more ambitious, whatever would make me enough again. The breaking point came in fragments. First, a call from the property manager of Elle's old apartment, the one she'd kept as an office space but rarely used. There was a maintenance issue that needed tenant approval. Ethan, confused, mentioned that Elle hadn't been using the apartment for months. That's odd, the property manager said. I've seen lights on several evenings this week. Then, an overheard conversation at a grocery store. Ethan, picking up ingredients for another dinner Elle would likely miss, rounded an aisle to find two women from Pinnacle as marketing coordinators he recognized from company events, whispering by the produce section. Practically attached at the hip, one was saying. Rebecca in HR says she's worried about liability issues. You've seen how he looks at her, the other replied. And Elle's not exactly discouraging it. They fell silent when they spotted Ethan, exchanging uncomfortable glances before hurrying away. The final piece fell 3 days later. Michael Jong, a developer from Pinnacle who had always been friendly to Ethan, bumped into him at a coffee shop near Elle's work. Hey, man, Michael said, the greeting unnaturally loud. Haven't seen you around lately. Elle's been busy with the Westridge campaign, Ethan replied, the excuse now automatic. Michael's expression shifted, discomfort clouding his features. Look, I probably shouldn't say anything, but as someone who's been through something similar. He trailed off, glancing around the cafe as if checking for other Pinnacle employees. What is it? Ethan asked, dread pooling in his stomach. Michael sighed. There's something off about how Jordan interacts with Elle. It's not just professional admiration. The way he singles her out, the private meetings, the late dinners. I've seen this pattern before with his previous protégés. Previous protégés? At his last 2 companies. Young, talented women he takes under his wing. Promotes rapidly. Lavishes with attention. Michael looked down at his coffee cup. It never ends well for them professionally. Or personally. You think he and Elle are? Michael held up his hands. I don't know for sure. But the rumors are getting hard to ignore. And Jordan, he has a way of making women feel like they need his approval. Like their entire future depends on staying in his good graces. The words landed like stones, each one heavier than the last. That night, when Elle returned home, midnight again, perfume again, distant again, Ethan finally confronted her directly. Are you having an affair with Jordan? The question hung in the air between them, stark and unavoidable. Elle's expression cycled through surprise, anger, and finally, a practiced calm that chilled Ethan more than any admission would have. That's ridiculous, she said, her voice steady. Jordan is my mentor. My boss. That's all. Then why are you at your old apartment with him? Why do you disappear for hours with no explanation? Why did you pretend I was just a friend at the gala? You're being paranoid, Elle snapped. This is exactly why I haven't wanted to talk about work with you. You twist everything into some soap opera drama. Then explain it to me, Ethan pleaded. Help me understand what's happening, because from where I'm standing, it feels like you're slipping away, and I don't know how to hold on anymore. For a moment, just a brief flash, Elle's facade cracked. Something like guilt, or grief, or both, flickered across her face. But then the professional mask slid back into place. "It's just work pressure," she said, her voice softening into something that almost sounded like the Elle he'd fallen in love with. "This campaign could make my career, Ethan. I need to focus right now. When it's over, things will go back to normal." He wanted to believe her. Desperately wanted to. But the evidence kept stacking, the inconsistencies multiplying, the distance between them growing. "I'll try to be home earlier tomorrow," Elle promised, squeezing his hand briefly before disappearing into the bathroom. An hour later, as Elle slept, her phone lit up on the nightstand. Ethan, still awake and wrestling with his thoughts, couldn't help but see the preview notification. A message from Jordan, "Tomorrow, 8 p.m. The usual place. Wear that red dress I like." Ethan stared at the ceiling until morning, the pieces finally, irrefutably, falling into place. "Before we continue to what happened next," Ethan said to the camera, his voice suddenly tired, "quick question, are you subscribed? If not, go ahead and fix that for me. I promise, I'll keep the stories coming. And trust me, what happens next changed everything." "I didn't sleep that night," Ethan said, his voice hollow. "I just lay there beside her, listening to her breathe, wondering when exactly she became a stranger." Morning arrived with sickening clarity. Elle rushed through her routine, barely speaking to him beyond a hurried late for a meeting as she grabbed her keys. She didn't kiss him goodbye. Hadn't for weeks now. The moment the door closed behind her, something in Ethan hardened. The desperate hope that had kept him clinging to excuses and explanations crumbled away, replaced by a cold determination to face the truth, whatever it might be. He called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Then he drove to Elle's office apartment. The building was a sleek high-rise in the trendy part of downtown, the kind with a doorman, rooftop pool, and floor-to-ceiling windows. Ethan had helped her move her desk and a few essentials there when they decided to live together, but he hadn't been back since. She'd kept her key on a separate ring from their shared apartment keys. Ethan approached the front desk with practiced casualness. "Good morning," he said to the uniformed attendant. "I'm here to pick up some files for Elle Deckard in 1408. She's expecting me." It was a risk, the attendant might call up to verify. But Ethan was betting on the impersonal efficiency of luxury buildings where residents rarely interacted with staff. His gamble paid off. The attendant barely glanced up from his computer. "Name?" "Ethan Hunt." "I'm her partner." A flicker of recognition crossed the attendant's face. "Oh, right. Ms. Deckard mentioned you might come by. Go ahead up." Ethan's stomach twisted. Elle had never mentioned he might come by. The attendant recognized him as her partner, which meant Elle still referred to him that way here, even while erasing their relationship elsewhere. The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt eternal. Each floor ticked by with the weight of dread building in his chest. When the doors opened, Ethan hesitated before stepping into the hallway. Part of him wanted to press the lobby button, go home, and pretend this day never started. But he couldn't live in uncertainty anymore. Apartment 1408 was at the end of the hallway. Ethan stood before the door, heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't have a key. He didn't have a plan beyond this moment. He raised his hand to knock, then lowered it again. What was he doing? Breaking into her apartment? Becoming the jealous, controlling boyfriend she already seemed to think he was? He was about to turn away when the door across the hall opened. An elderly woman emerged, struggling with a small rolling cart of groceries. "Oh," she said, startled to find Ethan standing there. "Good morning." "Good morning," Ethan replied automatically. "Can I help you with that?" The woman accepted gratefully, and as Ethan guided her cart toward the elevator, she chatted amiably. "Are you visiting Elle? Such a lovely girl. Always says hello in the hallway, unlike some of these young people these days." Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. "Though that boss of hers, I'm not sure I care for him," she continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "The walls in these buildings aren't as thick as they should be, if you know what I mean. Some nights I can hear them arguing. Other nights." She trailed off, her meaning clear. "But I suppose that's none of my business." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Ethan's feet. Her boss comes here often, he managed to ask, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. Oh my, yes. At least 3 evenings a week. Always bringing those files and papers. Working so late. In my day, we left work at the office. She shook her head disapprovingly. Though last night was especially loud. I nearly called the front desk to complain. Last night. While Ethan had been preparing a dinner she never ate. While he'd been waiting up, worrying. He helped the woman into the elevator, declined her invitation to tea with a polite excuse, and returned to Il's door. This time, he knocked, firmly, deliberately. No answer. He tried the handle, not expecting it to turn. But it did. The apartment was unlocked. By the way, Ethan said to the camera, his expression grave, if you're feeling the weight of this story already and haven't subscribed yet, it would mean a lot if you'd join our community right now. Sometimes sharing our pain helps lighten the load. Ethan stepped into the apartment, closing the door softly behind him. What he found wasn't an office space. It was a fully furnished apartment, sleek, modern, with touches he didn't recognize. A throw pillow that had never been in their home. Wine glasses that weren't from their kitchen. A man's jacket draped over a dining chair. On the coffee table sat 2 empty wine glasses, lipstick on one rim. Beside them, a folder embossed with the Pinnacle logo lay open, papers scattered as if abandoned in a hurry. Ethan moved through the space like a man underwater, each discovery hitting him with delayed impact. In the kitchen, a corkscrew left beside an empty bottle of expensive Cabernet. 2 plates in the sink with remnants of what looked like takeout from Alessandro's, the Italian restaurant El had once said was too pretentious when Ethan suggested it for their anniversary. The bedroom door was partially open. He knew he should turn around. Leave. Preserve whatever dignity remained. But his feet carried him forward as if following a script already written. The bedroom had been lived in. Recently. The sheets were tangled, pillows askew. El's signature perfume hung in the air, mingled with a cologne Ethan recognized from the gala, Jordan's scent. On the nightstand sat a small velvet jewelry box, open to reveal a pair of diamond earrings that Ethan could never have afforded. Beside it lay El's phone, her second phone, he realized with sickening clarity. The one she must use for communication she didn't want him to see. The phone screen lit up with a notification as he stared at it. A text message from Jordan. Last night was incredible. Remember, at the board presentation, let me take the lead first. Once I introduce you as my right hand, you'll deliver the strategy portion. We'll show them why we're unstoppable together. After we nail this, Paris is definitely happening. Just us, champagne, and that suite I promised. Ethan sank onto the edge of the bed, the room spinning around him. It wasn't just an affair. It was a complete double life. As if in a trance, he picked up Il's phone. It opened without a passcode. This secret phone apparently didn't need the security her regular one did. He shouldn't look. He knew he shouldn't. But the screen was already open to her message thread with Jordan, and his eyes caught on a message from 3 weeks earlier, the day before the gala. Jordan, remember what we discussed about keeping things professional tomorrow night. The Kingsley account depends on projecting the right image. No distractions. El, what about Ethan? He's expecting to be introduced as my partner. Jordan, the narrative needs to be about your independence. Your dedication. Your potential. Personal attachments suggest divided priorities. L, I don't know if I can just pretend he's not important to me. We've been together 3 years. Jordan L, do you want to be taken seriously in this industry? Do you want the promotion we discussed? The equity package? The future I'm offering you? L, of course I do. Jordan, then make a choice. You can't have both. And then, the day of the gala. Jordan, if Ethan creates any awkwardness tonight, just use the line we practiced. Just a friend who exaggerates our relationship. Clean, simple, establishes boundaries. L, it feels cruel. Jordan, it's business, L. Sometimes we make difficult choices for exceptional outcomes. I would never have gotten where I am by prioritizing other people's feelings over my ambitions. Neither will you. The messages continued, dozens, hundreds of them. Plans, promises, late-night exchanges that grew increasingly intimate. Jordan's manipulation was evident in every word, dangling promotions, exclusivity, a future that hinged entirely on Elle separating herself from Ethan. And Elle had chosen. Repeatedly. Deliberately. With increasing enthusiasm as the messages progressed. The final blow came when Ethan scrolled to messages from that very morning. Elle, he asked about us last night. Directly. Jordan, what did you say? Elle denied everything. Said he was being paranoid. Jordan, good. We're too close to everything falling into place. The board presentation is tomorrow, then we announce your promotion to executive creative director. After that, you can end things with him cleanly. A few more days of pretending, then you'll be free. Elle, I hate lying to him. He deserves better. Jordan, he deserves someone who shares his modest ambitions. You deserve someone who can match your potential. Someone who understands what real success requires. Elle, you're right. As always. See you at 8. I'll wear the red dress. Ethan set the phone down, his hands trembling. The humiliation at the gala hadn't been a momentary lapse or a professional misstep. It had been rehearsed. Calculated. Part of a larger strategy orchestrated by Jordan and embraced by Elle. Everything, every late night, every missed dinner, every dismissive comment about his career, suddenly clicked into a pattern so obvious he wondered how he'd missed it for so long. Elle hadn't just been pulled away from him. She'd been actively pushing him away, creating distance to make the final break easier. Making him the villain in their story so she could justify her betrayal. In that moment, Ethan said to the camera, his voice steady despite the pain evident in his eyes, everything changed. The hurt was still there, God, was it there, but something else rose up alongside it. Clarity. Anger. A kind of cold certainty that I didn't deserve what they'd done to me. He stood, taking one last look around the apartment that represented Elle's true choice. Then he walked out, closing the door firmly behind him. In the elevator, he made 2 calls. First, to his boss, extending his sick day to the rest of the week. Second, to a locksmith. By the time Elle returned home that evening, she would find the locks changed, her belongings packed, and a note on the counter with just 5 words. I've seen the red dress. The thing about betrayal, Ethan said softly, is that it doesn't just break your heart. It rewrites your past. Every memory becomes a question. Every happy moment becomes suspect. But what I didn't realize then was that sometimes, betrayal also clears the way for something better. Something true. He paused, looking directly into the camera. Before we continue, can I ask a tiny favor? Hit that subscribe button. It means more than you know. And stay with me, because what happened next, that's where this story really begins. The aftermath was nuclear. Elle called 17 times that night. Each voicemail grew progressively more frantic, evolving from confused, why are the locks changed, to defensive, you had no right to go through my things, to manipulative, you're overreacting, we can talk about this, to desperate, please, Ethan, just let me explain. He listened to each one, sitting alone in the darkened apartment, a glass of whiskey untouched before him. He didn't cry. Didn't rage. Just listened as the woman he thought he knew cycled through every possible strategy to regain control of the situation. At 1:43 a.m., the final message arrived. Fine, Elle's voice was ice-cold now. If that's how you want to play this, I'll have my lawyer contact you about my belongings. Jordan says I should just write everything off and start fresh anyway. He says I deserve better than second-hand furniture and a man who can't handle a woman's success. Goodbye, Ethan. That's when I finally drank the whiskey, Ethan told the camera. And when I finally allowed myself to cry. The next morning, reality crashed down with brutal force. 3 years of his life had evaporated overnight. The future he'd planned, marriage, children, growing old together, had never been real. Just a comforting illusion while Elle planned her escape to something she considered better. He called in sick for the rest of the week. His boss was understanding at first. Take the time you need, Graham had said. Breakups are tough. But when 1 week stretched into 2, the sympathetic messages grew strained. Projects were piling up. Clients were asking questions. Deadlines were approaching. "I know you're going through something," Graham said in his third voicemail, "but I need to know when you're coming back. The Harrison project can't wait much longer." Ethan tried to work from home, staring at architectural drawings that once excited him but now felt as meaningless as the relationship he'd lost. His focus had shattered. His creativity had vanished. Even simple tasks required monumental effort. Meanwhile, Elle's social media transformation was complete. Photos appeared of her at industry events, always near Jordan, her smile radiant as she accepted congratulations on her promotion to Executive Creative Director, the youngest in the company's history. The announcement had made the industry blogs, with Jordan quoted as saying, "Elle represents the future of Pinnacle, brilliant, fearless, and uncompromising." Uncompromising. The word felt like a direct shot at Ethan, who had compromised everything trying to make Elle happy. Friends began taking sides. Mutual acquaintances who worked in marketing or tech gravitated toward Elle and her rising star. Invitations to gatherings dried up. Text threads fell silent. Even friends Ethan had considered his own began to distance themselves, not wanting to be associated with the failed relationship in Elle's success story. "It wasn't just losing Elle," Ethan explained, his voice hollow. "It was losing our entire social world. In their version of events, I was the jealous boyfriend who couldn't handle his girlfriend's success. The guy who changed the locks in a petty rage. The cautionary tale they whispered about at happy hours." Elle and Jordan made no effort to hide their relationship now. They arrived together at industry events, his hand possessively at her waist. There were rumors of a shared penthouse downtown. Instagram stories showed weekend trips to wine country, Elle laughing beside Jordan at exclusive restaurants, both of them looking like they'd stepped from the pages of a luxury magazine. One evening, scrolling mindlessly through social media, a habit he couldn't seem to break despite how much it hurt, Ethan saw a photo that stopped his breath. Elle, smiling radiantly at a charity gala, wearing diamond earrings he recognized from the apartment. On her finger glittered a massive engagement ring. The caption read, "Sometimes the wrong path leads you to the right person. Saying yes to my mentor, my partner, my future. #blessed by love." The comments were a stream of congratulations from industry connections, each more effusive than the last. Jordan's comment topped them all. "From the moment I saw your potential, I knew you were destined for exceptional things. This is just the beginning of our empire." Ethan threw his phone across the room. It hit the wall with a satisfying crack before falling to the floor, screen shattered, a perfect metaphor for his heart. "If you're still with me on this journey," Ethan said, looking into the camera with red-rimmed eyes, "thank you. It means everything to know I'm not alone in this room right now. Why haven't you subscribed yet? Don't you like the story? Your support is what keeps me sharing these difficult truths." Rock bottom arrived 3 weeks after the locksmith visit. Ethan was called into Graham's office on a Tuesday morning. He knew what was coming before a word was spoken. The Harrison project was in shambles, deadlines had been missed, and clients were threatening to pull their business. "I've always respected your work ethic," Graham said, discomfort evident in his rigid posture. "But whatever's going on in your personal life has become a liability to this firm. We need reliable people, Ethan. Especially now." "Especially now?" Ethan repeated, his voice flat. Graham sighed, sliding a trade magazine across the desk. The headline jumped out immediately, *Pinnacle Innovation secures landmark deal with Harrison Development Group star. The article detailed how Jordan Bates and his brilliant creative team had won the commercial design contract for Harrison's new downtown headquarters, the very project Ethan's firm had been working on for months. "They undercut us by 15% and promised a revolutionary design approach," Graham explained. Bob Harrison specifically mentioned being impressed by the presentation from their new executive creative director. Elle. "Of course. I'm sorry, Ethan," Graham continued. "But with the Harrison account gone, we need to downsize. I can give you 2 weeks severance and a reference, but today needs to be your last day." Ethan nodded numbly, not trusting himself to speak. He packed his desk into a cardboard box, accepted awkward pats on the shoulder from colleagues who couldn't meet his eyes, and walked out of the building that had been his professional home for 6 years. The apartment felt cavernous that night. Empty and echoing with ghosts of a life that no longer existed. Rent was due in 10 days. His savings would cover maybe 2 months if he cut back on everything. The job market for architectural designers was competitive even when you weren't carrying the weight of depression and betrayal. He sat on the floor of the living room. He'd sold the couch to cover last month's rent and finally allowed himself to face the truth he'd been avoiding. Elle and Jordan hadn't just taken his relationship. They'd systematically dismantled his entire life. His career was in ruins. His social circle had evaporated. His financial security was crumbling. And worst of all, his belief in himself, the quiet confidence that had once been his foundation, had been replaced by a gnawing certainty that maybe Jordan and Elle were right. Maybe he wasn't enough. Maybe he never had been. The darkest thoughts crept in during those endless night hours. Maybe this was all he deserved. A failed relationship. A stalled career. An empty apartment. Maybe some people were just meant to be stepping stones for others on their way to greater things. I hit bottom that night, Ethan confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. Sitting alone on the floor of an apartment I could no longer afford, surrounded by the remnants of a life I'd lost, I couldn't see a way forward. Couldn't imagine how anything would ever be okay again. He stared at his phone, the cracked screen still able to display messages no one was sending, calls no one was making. And then, just as he was about to turn it off and surrender to the darkness pressing in from all sides, a notification appeared. An email from a name he barely recognized, Michael Jong, the developer from Pinnacle who had warned him about Jordan months ago. The subject line read simply, "You need to see this." That email, Ethan said, looking directly into the camera, was the first piece of a truth that would change everything. But I didn't know it yet. All I knew was that I had nothing left to lose. He opened the email, and what he found there ignited the first spark of something he hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The email from Michael Jong contained 3 attachments and a brief message. Ethan. I heard what happened with your job. Word travels fast in this industry. I've been debating whether to send this for weeks, but after seeing the engagement announcement, I can't stay silent anymore. Jordan Bates isn't who Elle thinks he is. He's not who anyone thinks he is. The first attachment is a confidential HR report from Vertex Systems, Jordan's previous company. The second is a series of emails between Jordan and his last protege at Skylink Technologies. The third is something I recorded at a Pinnacle executive dinner last week. I'm risking my job by sending this. Please be careful how you use it. Michael. Ethan stared at the message for a long moment, his heart beating faster than it had in weeks. With trembling fingers, he opened the first attachment. It was a formal complaint document, heavily redacted but still legible. The remaining text detailed allegations against Jordan Bates by a former employee named Claire Winters. She described a pattern of manipulation, professional mentorship that gradually crossed boundaries, promises of career advancement tied to personal loyalty, isolation from colleagues and friends, and ultimately, a complete professional dismantling when she attempted to end their relationship. The document ended with a settlement agreement and a non-disclosure clause. The second attachment contained email exchanges between Jordan and someone named Alyssa Chen. They mirrored, with eerie similarity, the messages Ethan had seen between Jordan and Elle. The same professional seduction. The same isolation tactics. The same promises of an empire they would build together. The final exchange was devastating. Jordan. You promised I would be named creative director. The board gave the position to Thomas yesterday on your recommendation. When I asked you about it, you said I wasn't ready. After everything, the late nights, the weekends, the ideas I developed that you presented as your own, how could you do this to me? To us? Alyssa. Jordan's reply was clinical. Alyssa. Your emotional reaction to a standard business decision proves you aren't ready for executive leadership. I suggest taking some time to reflect on whether Skylink remains the right environment for your career development. Our personal arrangement was never connected to professional advancement. I think it's best we both move on professionally and personally. Jordan. 2 weeks later, a final email from Alyssa. You've made it impossible for me to stay. No one will work with me now that you've told everyone I'm unstable. 3 years of my career wasted. I hope your next project turns out better for her than it did for me. Ethan's hands were shaking by the time he opened the third attachment, an audio file. He pressed play, and Jordan's smooth voice filled the empty apartment. Exactly according to plan. The Harrison deal alone will boost our valuation by 20% before the IPO. Elle's been invaluable, of course. A female voice Ethan didn't recognize responded, she's certainly risen quickly. Youngest executive creative director in company history, wasn't it? Jordan's laugh was smug. The title is ceremonial. Looks good in press releases, makes her feel important. But between us, she's a temporary asset. Useful for her connections and fresh perspective, but ultimately replaceable once the IPO launches. I give it 6 months before we restructure her role into obsolescence. And the engagement, the woman asked. A calculated move, Jordan replied casually. Having my fiancé present at investor meetings creates a certain image. Stability. Vision. The power couple narrative plays well with the board. The ring costs less than a decent marketing campaign and achieves twice the impact. Does she know this is temporary? Jordan's voice lowered, but the recorder caught his words clearly. Elle sees what she wants to see. They all do. By the time she realizes the truth, the IPO will be complete, my options will be vested, and any allegations will sound like the bitter complaints of an ex-fiancé who couldn't meet expectations. The recording ended there. Ethan sat in stunned silence, the pieces rearranging themselves in his mind. Jordan Bates wasn't just a rival who had stolen Elle. He was a predator with a documented pattern. Elle wasn't simply a willing participant in Ethan's humiliation, she was the latest target in Jordan's calculated game of manipulation, seduction, and eventual destruction. In that moment, Ethan told the camera, his expression shifting from pain to determination, everything changed. Not because I suddenly forgave Elle, what she'd done still cut deep. But because I realized this wasn't just about my broken heart anymore. It was about stopping a pattern that had destroyed careers and lives before, and would continue long after Elle was discarded. He spent the night researching Jordan Bates more thoroughly than he'd ever researched anything. Social media deep dives. LinkedIn histories. Industry forum discussions. Press releases from previous companies. A pattern emerged with sickening clarity: every 2 to 3 years, a new company, a new protégé, a new scandal quietly buried under NDAs and settlements. By dawn, Ethan had compiled a dossier that told the story Jordan had worked so hard to hide, a story of systematic manipulation, professional sabotage, and personal destruction. But what could he do with it? Elle wouldn't believe him, she was too deeply under Jordan's influence. Going public might violate the NDAs of Jordan's previous victims. And who would believe Ethan anyway? He would look like a bitter ex trying to sabotage Elle's new relationship. The answer came in the form of another email from Michael. Pinnacle's board of directors is meeting next Friday to finalize pre-IPO arrangements. Jordan and Elle are presenting together, their first official appearance as an engaged couple. The board chairwoman, Victoria Rowe, has been vocal about improving ethics in tech leadership. Just thought you should know. A plan began to form in Ethan's mind, not a plan for revenge, but for justice. Not just for himself, but for Claire, for Alyssa, and even for Elle, who didn't yet know she was simply the latest in a line of disposable stepping stones in Jordan's career. Before we continue with what happened next, Ethan said, looking directly into the camera, his eyes now clear and focused, if you're feeling this story in your heart and haven't subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate if you join our family right now. Each subscription helps me continue sharing these stories of struggle, betrayal, and ultimately, redemption. The next week transformed Ethan. He cut his hair. Bought a new suit with the last of his savings. Updated his resume. Applied to architectural firms in neighboring cities. Each small action rebuilt a fraction of the confidence that had been shattered. He reached out to Claire Winters with extreme caution, explaining the situation without asking her to break her NDA. To his surprise, she responded within hours. I can't legally discuss what happened. But I can legally attend a board meeting as the guest of a current employee and observe. Nothing in my agreement prevents me from being in a room with Jordan Bates. Sometimes presence alone sends a message. Alyssa Chen responded similarly, "I'll be there." Some truths don't need words to be understood. Michael arranged visitor passes for them through a sympathetic executive assistant. The plan wasn't to create a scene or make accusations, it was simpler and potentially more devastating, to be visible. To be present. To let Jordan see that his past was catching up with him, just as he prepared to repeat his pattern with Elle. The night before the board meeting, Ethan sat in his half-packed apartment, staring at his phone. After weeks of silence, he sent Elle a single text message. "I know about Claire Winters and Alyssa Chen. Before you commit your future to Jordan, ask him about them. You deserve the truth, even if it's not from me." She didn't respond. He hadn't expected her to. That night, for the first time since finding the red dress, Ethan slept deeply and dreamlessly. Whatever happened tomorrow, he had reclaimed something essential, his own agency, his own voice, his own truth. "The thing about rock bottom," Ethan said to the camera, a small smile finally touching his lips, "is that once you hit it, you discover what you're really made of. And sometimes, you discover you're made of something stronger than you ever imagined." The morning of the Pinnacle board meeting dawned clear and bright. Ethan dressed carefully in his new suit, his reflection in the mirror showing someone both familiar and changed, the same features, but with a gravity and resilience that hadn't been there before. As he drove downtown toward the Pinnacle headquarters, his phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "They're here. Claire and Alyssa are waiting in the lobby. Jordan doesn't know yet. Elle looks nervous, I think she might have asked him about them. Whatever happens next, you've already won by showing up." Ethan took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and headed toward the glass towers of Pinnacle Innovations, where everything, for better or worse, was about to change. The Pinnacle Innovations headquarters rose 60 stories into the sky, a gleaming monument to ambition and technology. As Ethan passed through the revolving doors into the marble-floored lobby, the weight of what he was about to do settled firmly on his shoulders. Michael was waiting near the security desk, anxiety evident in his tight smile. "They're on the executive floor," he said quietly, handing Ethan a visitor badge. "Board meeting starts in 20 minutes. Jordan and Elle are doing final preparations in the conference room." Ethan nodded, clipping the badge to his lapel. "Claire and Alyssa?" "Already upstairs." Victoria Rowe, the board chairwoman, invited them to her office when they arrived. "I don't know what they're discussing." The elevator ride to the 58th floor was silent, each floor bringing Ethan closer to a confrontation he'd both dreaded and needed. This wasn't about winning Elle back. That chapter was closed. This was about truth finally breaking through a carefully constructed facade. The executive floor was all understated luxury, soft lighting, original artwork, plush carpeting that absorbed the sound of their footsteps. Through glass walls, Ethan could see groups of executives gathered in various meeting rooms, preparing for the board presentation that would set the stage for Pinnacle's IPO. And then he saw them. Elle and Jordan stood at the far end of the main conference room, their backs to the hallway as they reviewed something on a tablet. Elle wore a crimson dress, not the red dress from the apartment, but a similar statement of power and confidence. Her hair was swept up elegantly, diamonds glittering at her ears. Jordan stood close beside her, one hand resting possessively at the small of her back as he gestured with the other. They looked perfect together. Polished. Powerful. The quintessential power couple. But Ethan could see something else now, something he'd missed before. The slight stiffness in Elle's posture. The way she leaned almost imperceptibly away from Jordan's touch. The tension visible even from behind. "Something's off," Michael whispered, noticing it too. "They've been arguing all morning. Ever since she asked him about Claire and Alyssa." Before Ethan could respond, a door opened at the end of the hallway. Victoria Rowe emerged, followed by Claire Winters and Alyssa Chen. Victoria, a formidable woman in her 60s with silver hair and piercing eyes, nodded briefly at Ethan as if she'd been expecting him. "Mr. Hunt," she said, her voice crisp and authoritative. "Thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. We'll handle it from here." Ethan blinked in surprise. "I didn't." "These women have shared concerning information about Mr. Bates' pattern of behavior," Victoria continued. "Information that, if verified, would present significant ethical and legal issues for Pinnacle, particularly on the eve of our public offering. Claire and Alyssa stood silently behind Victoria, their expressions resolute but unreadable. Victoria's gaze shifted to Michael. Mr. Jong, your recorded evidence has been particularly helpful. The board appreciates integrity, even when it involves risk to one's position. Michael swallowed visibly but stood straighter. Thank you, Victoria turned back to Ethan. Now, Mr. Hunt. I believe you have personal business with Ms. Deckard. We won't interfere with that. But the board will be addressing Mr. Bates separately and immediately. With that, she strode toward the conference room, Claire and Alyssa following in her wake. The glass door opened, and Jordan turned, his practiced smile freezing on his face as he registered who had entered. Ethan couldn't hear what Victoria said, but he saw Jordan's expression shift from confidence to confusion to the beginning stages of panic. Elle, beside him, looked from Jordan to Claire to Alyssa, realization dawning in her eyes. You should go in, Michael urged quietly. This is your moment too. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. He straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and walked toward the conference room. As he entered, Jordan was already in defensive mode, his voice carrying that smooth, reasonable tone that had charmed investors and manipulated colleagues for years. Victoria, this is clearly a misunderstanding. These women have personal grievances that have nothing to do with. He stopped abruptly when he saw Ethan. For the briefest moment, genuine fear flashed across his face before the mask of control slipped back into place. What is this? Jordan demanded, looking from Victoria to Ethan. Some kind of ambush. Elle stood frozen, her gaze locked on Ethan. The color had drained from her face, leaving her lipstick a stark slash of red against suddenly pale skin. Ethan, she whispered, his name sounding strange on her lips after so many weeks of silence. Victoria's voice cut through the tension. Mr. Bates, the board has received concerning information about your professional conduct at your previous companies, as well as here at Pinnacle. We're postponing today's presentation while we conduct a thorough investigation. Jordan's laugh was sharp and dismissive. This is ridiculous. We're about to secure the most significant IPO in the company's history, and you're delaying because of unsubstantiated claims from disgruntled ex-employees. His gaze cut to Ethan. And jealous ex-boyfriends. The claims are far from unsubstantiated, Victoria replied coolly. We have documentation, testimony, and recorded evidence of a disturbing pattern. A pattern that appears to be repeating itself with Ms. Deckard. Jordan's mask slipped further, anger bleeding through. Elle understands what it takes to succeed in this industry. Don't you, Elle? His tone carried a warning. A reminder of all he'd promised her, and all he could take away. Elle didn't respond. She was looking at Claire and Alyssa, really seeing them for the first time. Two women who stood with the quiet dignity of those who had survived something devastating and emerged stronger. Tell them, Elle, Jordan insisted, his voice hardening. Tell them about our vision. Our future. Everything we've planned. Elle's gaze finally shifted to Ethan. In her eyes, he saw confusion, pain, and the first glimmers of a terrible understanding. You knew, she said softly. That's why you texted me about them. Ethan nodded. I found out a week ago. Jordan has done this before, Elle. Multiple times. The mentorship. The isolation. The promises. The promotion that makes you dependent on him. It's a pattern. Jordan stepped forward, his facade cracking further. This is absurd. Elle, we need to prepare for the board. These people are trying to derail everything we've worked for. Everything you've worked for, Claire corrected quietly, speaking for the first time. That's the pattern, Elle. He builds up women who can help his career, uses them until they've served their purpose, then discards them when they're no longer useful or when they start asking questions. Alyssa nodded. I was executive creative director too. Until I wasn't. Until the IPO at Skylink was secure and Jordan decided to move on to his next opportunity. To his next protégé. Elle's hand moved unconsciously to the engagement ring on her finger. The IPO, she whispered. You said after the IPO we would take our relationship public. Build our empire, Jordan finished, his voice softening to the persuasive purr Ethan recognized from the gala. And we will. These people are trying to sabotage us, Elle. They're jealous of what we've built. What we have. Victoria interrupted with clinical precision. What you have, Mr. Bates, is a meeting with legal in 5 minutes. Ms. Deckard, your position at Pinnacle is not in jeopardy, but I suggest you take the day to process this information. Mr. Hunt, she turned to Ethan, you've done what you came to do. I recommend letting Ms. Deckard reach out when she's ready. With that, Victoria gestured to 2 security personnel who had materialized in the doorway. Please escort Mr. Bates to the legal department. Jordan's composure shattered completely. This is outrageous. Elle, tell them. Tell them what we've accomplished together. Tell them what I've done for your career. But Elle had gone still, her gaze now fixed on the tablet Jordan had set down. The screen displayed a series of messages about her. Plans for after the IPO. Restructuring. Phase-out strategies. Replacement candidates. Her future, already mapped out without her knowledge, a future that ended with her discarded just like Claire and Alyssa before her. You never intended to marry me, she said, her voice barely audible. The ring. The engagement announcement. It was all just marketing. Jordan's expression hardened as he realized what she was seeing. Elle, business is complex. Long-term planning requires. Security will take it from here, Victoria interrupted, nodding to the waiting personnel. As Jordan was escorted from the room, his final glare landed not on Elle, but on Ethan, a look of pure hatred for the man who had dismantled his carefully constructed world. When the door closed behind them, silence fell. Claire and Alyssa exchanged a look of grim satisfaction before following Victoria out, leaving Ethan and Elle alone in the conference room. For a long moment, neither spoke. The distance between them, physical and emotional, seemed both vast and insignificant compared to everything that had happened. Did you come to watch me fall? Elle finally asked, her voice hollow. To enjoy your revenge. Ethan shook his head. No. I came because no one warned you. No one warned Claire or Alyssa either. The pattern had to stop. So this was, what? A rescue. Her laugh was bitter. After everything I did to you. Not a rescue, Ethan corrected gently. A choice. My choice to act with the integrity you once claimed to love about me. Elle's composure finally cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, and her hand, the one with Jordan's enormous ring, trembled visibly. I believed him, she whispered. I believed everything. That I was special. Different. That we were building something real. You wanted to believe it, Ethan said, no accusation in his voice, only understanding. We all believe what we need to sometimes. I destroyed us for this, Elle said, looking around the opulent conference room that now felt like a stage set, impressive but ultimately hollow. I hurt you deliberately, Ethan. I let him convince me it was necessary. That you were holding me back. I know. How can you stand there so calmly? Why aren't you yelling at me? Telling me I got what I deserved? Ethan considered her question carefully. Because that wouldn't heal anything. Not for you. Not for me. He moved toward the door, then paused. The night of the gala, when you said I was just a friend who exaggerated our relationship, that sentence didn't just humiliate me, Elle. It erased 3 years of honesty between us. But it also forced me to see something I'd been avoiding, that I deserved more than someone who could discard me so easily. Elle flinched at his words, but didn't argue. Jordan didn't make you choose him over me, Ethan continued quietly. He just presented the choice. You made the decision. Multiple times. And maybe that's what you needed to learn about yourself. Fresh tears spilled down Elle's cheeks. What happens now, she asked, sounding lost in a way Ethan had never heard before, not even in their most vulnerable moments together. Now, you rebuild. Just like I've had to. Just like Claire and Alyssa did. He offered a small, genuine smile. You're still brilliant at what you do, Elle. That part wasn't a lie. He turned to leave, a sense of completion settling over him. This chapter of his life was closing, not in bitterness or triumph, but in a quiet understanding that some endings, however painful, are necessary for growth. Ethan, Elle called after him, her voice catching. I'm sorry. For everything. He looked back at her one last time. I know. Someday, that will be enough. As Ethan walked through the halls of Pinnacle Innovations toward the elevator, he felt lighter than he had in months. Not because justice had been served or because Elle finally understood the truth about Jordan, but because he had faced his deepest fear, being seen as not enough, and discovered that his worth had never depended on someone else's validation. Outside the building, the spring sunshine felt warmer on his face. His phone buzzed with a notification, an email from an architectural firm in Seattle expressing interest in his portfolio. New possibilities. New beginnings. The thing about betrayal, Ethan told the camera, a genuine smile now warming his eyes, is that surviving it teaches you exactly how strong you really are. And sometimes, the person who walks away from you is simply making space for the life you actually deserve. 6 months can change everything, Ethan said, adjusting his position slightly in the comfortable leather chair that had replaced his old furniture. The apartment behind him was different now, bright, open, with architectural drawings pinned to a corkboard and large windows overlooking a waterfront view of Seattle. A life rebuilt, piece by deliberate piece. After that day at Pinnacle, I drove home feeling something I hadn't expected, peace. He smiled, the expression reaching his eyes in a way it hadn't during the earlier parts of his story. Not happiness, not yet. But a quietness inside that felt like the beginning of healing. The week following the confrontation had been a whirlwind. News of Jordan Bates' leave of absence from Pinnacle hit the industry blogs within days. The official statement cited personal reasons, but whispers of ethics investigations and board intervention spread quickly through professional networks. Ethan had packed the last of his belongings, said goodbye to the apartment that held too many memories, and driven north to Seattle for an interview with Horizon Design Group, an innovative firm known for sustainable urban architecture. The position they offered paid less than his previous job but promised creative freedom he'd never had before. I took the job, Ethan told the camera. And I took an apartment with a view of the water because I'd always wanted to wake up to something vast and ever-changing. Something that reminded me daily that life never stays the same for long. The first months in Seattle had been focused on rebuilding, professionally and personally. Ethan immersed himself in his new role, channeling his emotions into designs that seemed to flow more authentically than his work ever had before. His team leader noticed, giving him increasing responsibility on projects that challenged and fulfilled him. The strange thing about betrayal, Ethan reflected, is how it forces you to decide who you want to become afterward. You can either let it shrink you and make you bitter, suspicious, closed off, or you can use it as a catalyst for growth. He chose growth. Therapy helped, weekly sessions where he gradually untangled the complex web of emotions Elle and Jordan had left him with. Anger. Humiliation. Lingering affection. Grief for what might have been. Self-doubt that ambushed him in quiet moments. The hardest part wasn't forgiving Elle, Ethan admitted. It was forgiving myself for missing all the signs. For doubting my worth because someone else couldn't see it. 3 months after moving to Seattle, Ethan received an unexpected email from Michael Jong. He'd been promoted to senior developer at Pinnacle after Jordan's permanent departure from the company. The board had discovered financial improprieties along with the ethics violations, leading to a negotiated separation agreement that effectively ended Jordan's career in the industry. As for Elle, she reached out eventually, Ethan said, his expression thoughtful rather than pained. A handwritten letter that arrived for months after everything fell apart. She wrote that she was in therapy too, working to understand the choices she'd made and the person she wanted to become. Elle had resigned from Pinnacle despite Victoria Rose's assurance that her position was secure. The environment held too many reminders, too much complicated history. She'd taken a position with a smaller firm where she could rebuild her career on more honest foundations. She apologized, really apologized, for what she'd done, Ethan continued. Not just for the humiliation at the gala, but for the gradual erosion of trust that came before it. For prioritizing ambition over integrity. For letting Jordan's validation matter more than our history. The letter hadn't asked for reconciliation or forgiveness. It simply acknowledged the truth of what had happened and the responsibility Elle was taking for her choices. I wrote back, Ethan said. Not immediately, but when I felt ready. I thanked her for the apology and wished her well. Some chapters aren't meant to be reopened, but that doesn't mean you can't acknowledge they were part of your story. As Seattle's rainy winter gave way to spring, Ethan's life expanded in unexpected ways. A community garden project introduced him to neighbors who became friends. A local architecture club connected him with colleagues who shared his passion for sustainable design. A charity fundraiser led to an opportunity to design affordable housing, work that fed his soul in ways corporate projects never had. And then there was Sophia. We met at a coffee shop near the waterfront, Ethan said, a different kind of warmth entering his voice. She's a marine biologist, passionate about her work in a way that reminds me how attractive genuine enthusiasm is. We started talking about the impact of urban development on aquatic ecosystems, and somehow 3 hours disappeared. He wasn't rushing into anything. They were taking it slow. Coffee dates became dinner dates, became weekend hikes through the lush forests surrounding Seattle. Sophia knew about Elle, about the betrayal, about the lessons learned. Her response had been simple: "Thank you for trusting me with that story. It's part of what made you who you are now." The difference, Ethan explained, is that with Sophia, I never feel like I need to be more than I am to be enough. And I never want her to feel that way either. 5 months after arriving in Seattle, Ethan received another unexpected communication, an invitation to submit a design for a major sustainable housing development in his hometown. His concept, innovative, practical, compassionate, was selected over submissions from firms twice the size of Horizon. "That project brought me full circle in a way," he said. "Back to where everything started, but as someone new. Someone stronger." The recognition from that project led to others. Ethan's career, which had seemed shattered beyond repair in the aftermath of Elle's betrayal, was flourishing in ways he couldn't have imagined. Not because he was trying to prove anything to anyone, but because he was finally creating from an authentic place. "Last month, I ran into Claire Winters at a design conference in Vancouver," Ethan continued. "She's a UX director at a respected tech firm now. We had coffee, and she told me something I've been thinking about ever since. She said, Jordan Bates didn't just take things from us. He showed us exactly how strong we could be when everything fell apart." Ethan smiled, the expression of a man who had walked through fire and emerged not unscathed, but transformed. "She's right. The sentence that humiliated me that night at the gala, it didn't just break something in me. It eventually broke me open to a better life, a truer sense of self." Outside his Seattle apartment window, the water glittered in the afternoon sun, ferries crossing the Sound against a backdrop of mountains. A view he would never have seen if his old life hadn't collapsed. "Sometimes," Ethan said softly, "the deepest betrayals are actually redirections. Painful, yes. Devastating in the moment, absolutely. But ultimately guiding you toward a life that fits you better than the one you were desperately trying to save." He leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. "If you're in that dark place right now, the place where I was sitting alone on the floor of an empty apartment, wondering how you'll ever be okay again, I need you to hear something. This isn't the end of your story. It's just the end of a chapter that wasn't serving your growth anymore." Behind him, a text notification lit up his phone screen, Sophia, suggesting a sunset walk along the beach later. The small smile that touched Ethan's lips at the sight held no trace of the pain that had dominated his earlier expressions. "Jordan and Elle taught me the hardest lesson I've ever learned," he reflected. "But also the most valuable. When someone shows you who they truly are, whether through cruelty, betrayal, or manipulation, believe them the first time. And then let them go, not with bitterness, but with gratitude for the redirection." He glanced at Sophia's message again, his smile deepening. Because sometimes, the person who walks away from you is actually clearing the path for the life and the people you were always meant to find. Ethan looked directly into the camera one final time, his eyes clear and peaceful. "Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it resonated with you in any way, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe to join our community. Every subscription helps me continue sharing these journeys of heartbreak and healing. And remember, whatever chapter you're in right now, it's not your whole story. The best parts might still be waiting to be written." The light caught the Seattle waters behind him, turning them to gold as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon. A fitting image for a man who had walked through darkness and emerged, finally, into the light of a new beginning. 3 years later. And that, Ethan said, adjusting the small gold band on his finger that caught the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, is how a single sentence that was meant to erase me ended up leading me exactly where I belonged. The Seattle skyline stretched beyond him, no longer new and unfamiliar, but home in every sense of the word. The architectural firm where he'd once been the newcomer now had his name on the door, Hunt & Associates, following a series of award-winning sustainable housing projects that had changed the urban landscape and his professional trajectory. Sophia and I got married last spring, he continued, smiling at the framed photo on the bookshelf behind him, the two of them on a rocky beach, windswept and laughing. Small ceremony, just friends and family. The kind of genuine connection I once thought was lost to me forever. His phone buzzed with a text notification. Sophia, reminding him not to forget the sonogram appointment that afternoon. His smile deepened as he glanced at it. Life has a way of giving you exactly what you need, even when it arrives packaged as devastating loss. He ran a hand through his hair, now styled with the confidence of a man who knew exactly who he was. Sometimes I wonder if I would have found this path without that public humiliation forcing me to rebuild. As for Elle and Jordan, the industry gossip had followed a predictable arc. Jordan Bates had attempted to resurrect his career at several startups, but the whispers followed him. No board would risk the liability. Last Ethan heard, Jordan had retreated to consulting work, his empire-building ambitions permanently downsized. Elle had taken longer to surface professionally. A year of therapy, according to the occasional updates that reached Ethan through mutual connections. She had eventually landed at a non-profit focused on mentoring women in technology, a redemption arc that suggested her own journey through the darkness had yielded growth. She sent a gift when she heard about the baby, Ethan said, his expression reflective rather than bitter. A small wooden puzzle for developing spatial thinking. The note said simply, for the next generation of builders. May they learn earlier than we did what truly matters. He hadn't responded, but he'd kept the gift. Some wounds healed cleanly enough to allow generosity without reopening old scars. The firm's intercom buzzed. His design team was waiting to review the hospital wing project, his most ambitious work yet, combining healing spaces with environmental sustainability. Work that mattered. Work that helped rather than exploited. The most important thing I learned, Ethan said, standing and straightening his tie, is that sometimes when your worst fear comes true, being humiliated, being discarded, being seen as not enough, you discover that surviving it gives you an unshakable kind of strength. He picked up his portfolio, ready to join his team. I don't regret loving Elle. I don't even regret losing her. Every step of that painful journey led me here, to meaningful work, to Sophia, to the family we're building, to the man I've become. His hand rested briefly on the small wooden box where he kept Elle's single sentence, not as a wound to revisit, but as a reminder of how completely life can transform when you choose growth over bitterness. So if you're watching this and standing in the ashes of something that feels like it destroyed you, Ethan said, his voice strong and clear, remember that destruction is just the first step in rebuilding something more authentic, more aligned with who you truly are. He glanced at his watch, time to go, time to move forward, as he'd been doing every day since walking out of Pinnacle Innovations 3 years ago. One last thing before I go, if my story has touched you in any way, please hit subscribe. Not just for me, but for yourself, as a promise that you'll keep seeking the truth in your own story, even when it hurts. Because the story never ends where the pain does. It continues, evolves, and ultimately leads exactly where you're meant to be. With that, Ethan Hunt, architect, husband, father-to-be, survivor, walked confidently toward his future, the shadows of betrayal long since transformed into the foundation of a life built on truth, purpose, and genuine love. End.